I do this because of the music, of course. This is in the center of this, and every people here are all passionate of this music, only for trance. This is how we feel it, how we feel this music all together.
For the street parade, for the electronic music, for the smiling people who's coming, it is a great feeling.
My name is Viktor Kidson and I'm here in Zurich for the Synergy Events presents the FSOE 500 Street Parade float, and I'm with Mike Push. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks.
You just got here.
Yeah. I came from an event last night in Belgium. A little sleep. Then we took the earliest flight here to be on time, since the Street Parade starts like around noon. So, and here we are, looking forward to the next chapter today.
We were just talking before. I don't think we've met, but I was looking through your Discogs. And there's so many of my favorite tracks made by you.
Yeah, what can I say? The early days of dance music, electronic music, or, trance, we named it afterwards. I think I was inspired and had so many influences at that time that it was really hard to put a track out every week. So I think I was, so productive at that time that I had to come up with certain new project names and alter egos. So I guess when I went for Push, it was more euphoric. When I went for Plastic Boy, it was melodic. I had projects like Liquid Overdose, which had more a techier edge. Moon Project, again, very emotional. And then, of course, also working with different kind of producers like Yves de Ruyter, Marco Bailey back in the days. Captured always a different sound, and a different sound needs a new alter ego or project.
Like, quickly looking back, which tracks are you the most proud of right now?
Many people always ask me that question. It's really hard to say. I would say all of them, otherwise I wouldn't put them out. But at the same time, I have regrets on certain projects I might have done, or I thought like, hey, this is something I want to head to in terms of an identity, because at the end, a project or alter ego stands also for an identity in the song. So there might be a couple that I think, I wish I never would done them, but at the end, it's so hard. If I say Universal Nation, I sound cliche. Sunrise at Palamos was a nice one. I like also what I did with the project Moon Project, if you remember that one. That was very melodic-y and an emotional kind of project. Was too many to mention. I mean, yeah.
What's that one track that you regret putting out then?
We got to do that behind the scenes. Well, no, it's basically sometimes you work with people that you do a project with, and then at the end maybe you think like, it wasn't a good match, and I leave it up to that.
What's the most challenging track you've ever done?
That's a hard thing. I mean, every track or project, or let's talk about the music, is a capture, I always tell people, of something out of my life. That might be, the moment I met my wife, when my boys were born, when my favorite football team won the Champions League. I mean, it's really, my music is based on life captures and emotions out of things that happened in my life. And I think that's the beauty of it, of making music.
If we go back to, you said the cliche, Universal Nation. What emotions does that remind you of when you produced it?
Really nothing. That's the whole thing. I mean, and still today, when I make music, the idea is to, if I produce it, I know I have to play it out, and the crowd will have to come out to hear and see me play it. Obviously, you create a bond. because they like it, and also they might use it in their lives for something that they go through, a process of a loss, of something they achieved. So I think, and I think that's what perfectly captures trance. It touches you so deep, and it's a very emotional thing that it's something you share with us all. And I think, yeah, it's also the definition of trance for me, basically.
We're gonna go move forward as well, but tell me just a tiny bit about the production of Universal Nation, because the track starts off pretty cool as well.
Tickety, 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 tickety. Very similar, right? Yeah. So I was one of the first who was given by Roland Corporation in Belgium the GP 8000, the legendary GP 8000, and it was one of the first in the new generation of synths that Roland was coming up with, and I had my hands on, and a waveform called Super Saw was never been done before, and it was something they developed, and it's with layers of I can go very technical, but basically it's layers of oscillators and filters, and you create different sections out of the synths, basically one big sound, and that created that typical sound of Universal Nation, for instance. And I think when I had the GP 8000 from Roland, I instantly think I grabbed it by the core, and I think I took out its full potential from day one, and I think that was what made it unique as well in the beginning. That people were like, oh, "Wow, what's that? What's that sound?" And then other producers like Ferry Corsten and like Armin also did not discover it through me, but they discovered the synth, and I guess they kind of tried out the same sound design and the potential. So, and then they did what they did with it. So yeah, Universal Nation basically came out of tweaking with, and that's what I love. When new technology comes out, it's just about trying out things, and all of a sudden, in a snap, something can happen. And I guess that's what happened.
What does your archive look like of unfinished tracks?
Well, I used to have a big catalog of tracks that I produced, and that at the end, I pick them up again after a couple months or even years, that I think like, hey, this is a really cool melody I came up with. So basically, I was never fond of keep creating and see what we can do with it. I always like to stick to, when I started with something, I like to finish it. So it might be maybe 10, 20 the most, so that's not that much. I know others have a bigger library, but for me, when I start something, I want to get my teeth in it, and I keep going till it's finished. So that's also why I came up with so many projects back in the days.
If we go back to 1984, you're 11 years old, and you're starting to explore music, right?
Yes. Captured by the likes of Depeche Mode, basically the whole upcoming of the synth-pop sound all over Europe. We were in Belgium a lot influenced with what came from England. Then you had Yazoo, Depeche Mode, Human League, Gary Newman. Obviously, as an 11-year-old, you have no clue. But in due time, when you get older, of course, you get to know them, or you read the magazines, and then you're like, oh, that was him, or that's what they used. And then you start to know the know-how about what they used to make music, samplers, drum machines. And that was, I was quickly getting the interest in getting my hands on something like that and do something like what they did. I remember that I wrote the fan club of Depeche Mode. This is a true story. I was 12 years old, and in the letter I wrote to the management, guys, if you one day would retire, can I start a band called Depeche Mode 2? I never had a reply back. They're still going around, so I'm happy with that.
What was your first contact with electronic music back then?
In terms of electronic dance music, that was very close to when I was 14, 15 years old. in Belgium there was an upcoming sound called New Beat, which basically was a faster electronic inspired or influenced dance project with a beat being pitched lower. And they called it in Belgium New Beat. So basically, if you have up-pitched music with like high energy drums and you slow it down, I don't know, it creates something in the lower end of the sound, or the bass hypnotizes you. I don't know what happened, but when DJs, instead of playing a track fast, start playing it slower, it created like a emotional, very dreamy atmosphere. And that was the time that electronic music, that I was really captured by it.
What was it that made you want to produce your own music then? Because you went from a listener to actually wanting to become a producer.
Seeing Depeche Mode perform on top of the Pops as a 14-year-old, 13-year-old, I didn't know it was called synths and drum machines and emulators and all the gear they had. But I remember that I said to my brother, you see, what those guys have on stage? I want to have that too. So I started small with, Casio kind of synths, like they were worth back in the days like 30, 40 euros, I guess. And yeah, I mean, I came up with a cunning plan that I said to my parents, like, listen, if I come home with good numbers from school, what do I get in exchange for that? And they said, what do you mean? I'm like, listen, when I come home, my grades are good. Can I pick something of my choice? And they said, yeah. And I started having a small synth. And my next grade, a bigger synth. And then I had a drum machine. And that happened for real. Crazy, yeah.
And then when you were 18, you sent in your first demo to a record label, right? Or
yeah. USA Import Records at that time. USA Import was one of the leading dance companies in Belgium, a record store. They had their own record label. They had a huge distribution network all over the world. So, and of course, as a 18-year-old, you wanted to be part of that. So I went straight to, the office there. I handed over my demo. And surprisingly, the same day they were saying like, hey, this sounds fresh. This is something we want to. I couldn't believe my ears. Like something I made on a 4-track tape recorder, not even on a digital audio tape. And the same day we signed the contract. And I was 18. And I couldn't believe what happened. I was like, actually, at that time, I thought like, that's it. My life is done. I'm settled for life. Obviously, it wasn't. But, I thought like, that's it. I'm going to stroll with the big ones now.
Was that a track that we know as well, or was that?
It was called Vision Act. It was a project I did with another guy I met back in the days. And basically, we used his gear. But for one reason or the other, at the time when we started working on it, I was more flexible working with samples. And even though my background is not like a musician, I guess it's yeah, you get it or you don't, I guess.
So what were, you said that you had big dreams back then. How would you describe them back then when you were 18, 19?
When I go back to the part when I told you about the new beat sound of music in Belgium, I still in love with it because I hold a big vinyl collection of basically all music from back in the days when I was a teenager. I'm a very nostalgic person, and I think we all are. If we listen to a track that makes us emotional, or that makes us, go back to the good old days when we were younger, or we experienced something. And I had that at the time with that kind of music, like new beat. I like I said, the music made me just dream. Electronic music made me feel nothing else matters. I'm here with surrounded with all those sounds, and I don't know. It just electronic music took me to a different kind of dimension, I guess.
You said that you got good feedback from the label when you sent in the demo, but what's the feeling like when you sit at home and you produce something, you give it to someone else, and they release it, and people love it? People start to buy it. How would you describe that feeling?
Well, it's a piece of art, basically, making music, because the art factor is not to force someone to like it. I think it's the hardest part of making music is do something that someone else also feels. where you can make a connection with. And I think that's why I still make music today. I don't make music to be in the chart. I don't make music to be on Beatport. I make music to make a connection with someone else, so we feel the same. And as long as I feel that, I keep going.
You were actually part of inventing trance music as well.
That's tough and hard to say, and at the same time flattering. Now, I had to say, and this is also a true story. If you go back to Marcos V's Twitter account, like 2 years ago, there was like a whole Twitter rant going on about who invented trance, who started, where's the influence coming from, who kind of pushed it through, and I don't know why. And Marco V jumped on the topic, and he replied to someone else saying, like, people always say that trance comes from Holland, or the Dutch kind of explored it. And Marco V goes like, we didn't. We actually stole it from the Belgians. But what the Dutch are good at, and still good at, and that's why I love to work with them, the Dutch know perfectly how to bring the best out of something, a person, something they discover, a talent. I think we Belgians, especially back in the days, were a bit too modest about like, hey, this is what we got, and be happy with it, and let's work on something. And the Dutch are much better in exporting a solid product. And again, I mean, my agency is based out of Holland. I mean, record company I work with in the past, present, future. So that goes that.
So another big question, but how did you create your sound, looking back now?
Going in the studio, and still today, if I look back in the days where I produced my music with hardware, all the synths, and now with software, there is not much difference. I literally sit down in the studio, I start working on a melody, a drum pattern. If I feel it, I keep going. If I don't feel it, I get out, I stop, and I get busy with my kids, or I'm gonna lawn the grass, or I do something else. No, I still work the same like back in the days. I go in the studio. It's the moment. I capture how I feel, and again, something that might have happened. I can come out of a great weekend from gigs, sit down in my chair in the studio, and I'm like, let's do it, and then it flows.
You said that you create music out of emotions. Is there any tracks that you have a problem listening back to? Because they were like in a dark time or something like that?
Not really. I mean, everyone goes through darker times and happier times, and you meet new people, you close off things in life. But I try to stay away with that. Again, I think the main part is to make a good connection and bring over the emotion. I mean, if you see, for instance, what Universal Nation does to a full crowd, like if you have a packed up Tomorrowland, and you see thousands of people start jumping in front of you, probably that track might be part of their story as well. So not only mine. And so there goes the connection. That's what I want to do. Just bringing out a connection with the crowd. The example, like when my first son was born, that was, and still is today, one of the highlights of my life, and something really, really special. So, and I think I back then translated that in a track, and then I shared it with the crowd.
Which track was that?
Which track was that? I think it was when I released the album Absolute through Armada. There was a couple tracks on there that I know for sure they had a connection with the birth of Maxime, my oldest son. And then when I married, and when I met Caroline, my wife, came the track Voices from the Inside. So we met in Miami. And when I came back from Miami, first track I made was Voices from the Inside. So there you go.
So in the beginning, did you have any producer friends that you could bounce back off with the sounds and stuff like that?
Well, what happened was with fellow producers, we were talking about different kind of genres maybe, and upcoming sounds or genres that were coming up at the time. But it was still everyone on his own, I guess, and we would help out each other where we can. And then, of course, there is always a friendship that grows. You have collaborations coming out of that, good ones. Some that you wish that would never happen, they happen as well, like I said earlier. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a really solid community of producers and DJs all together. Of course, there is always the whole thing about being ghost produced or not. I ghost produce people as well. People know that. I'm not ghost produced by anyone. But you know, it happened. And if I also look back at that, I mean, it's a phase, I guess, of the industry and also experimenting things. So at the same time, you know, helping out your fellow producers sometimes once in a while is not a bad thing.
Did you have any, or do you remember when you started to have any trans role models, other producers that you were like, wow, that's new thinking, or that's, yeah.
Of course, I had artists that as a DJ, producers, you know, the records they made that I would play it in my sets, because I started out of being actually a DJ before I was a producer. And people always think like, oh, okay, you start producing, so you got to become a DJ, especially in nowadays climate, like when it comes to surviving in the industry or you know, make a living out of actually music. I actually started off being a DJ when I was 14. I was holding already a vinyl collection. It wasn't really music I could get away with now because they were very experimental kind of records. But then I translated what I was DJing, actually the other way around, into start to produce something that was me and having, you know, creating my own identity. And then with that, I went on the road. So today you see a different kind of climate. I find that a lot start to produce, but they're going out to DJ either for the fame, or either to survive and kind of to fund their producing or whatever they have to invest in their career, which then I understand. But there is still good new breed that, you know, that I even see going around of artists that I say like, hey, those guys are doing cool stuff, like a Robert Nixon or like Sean and Xander, guys from Seattle I work with. And there's many out there that, you know, I do support if they do the right thing. So yeah, I'm saying I don't think it should be should sit on an island on our own. I mean, there's good support always needed.
You mentioned Robert Nixon, and you just did a track with them as well. What was that like?
That was fun. I know Robert for a long time, and I know Robert. That's an example. He's a fan of my stuff from what I did in the past and present, but I also really can appreciate what he's doing right now, and I know he's doing everything himself as well. He's a guy who really wants to discover new things, and he's experimenting. And then I like to work with people like Robert, for instance, and those are good collaborations because there is a connection. You want to do the same. Obviously, there is always an influence, but you know that's what it's about. Like I said, you have to support each other, and when there is a chemistry, just do it.
I have spoken to a few classic producers from the early 1990s and stuff like that. For some, it's been hard for them to follow the evolution of production, going from their hardware into everything that's happening now. How has that been for you?
Actually, I'm jumping back on hardware a lot now. As an artist, you always go through a phase of experimenting and trying different things. I'm not saying that I was on the verge or did try EDM at a time or deep house, but I might have almost an influence that I thought, oh, let me try it out. But there is a difference between let me try something out or, you know, put everything overboard and follow a hype. And that's what I never did. But obviously I come out of an era where you literally had to program everything to now an era that literally sometimes it's been given to you, you know, like plugins, presets, templates they sell on sample websites. So it's been made easier for a producer to be less creative, I might say, than if you have hands-on gear where you have to do it yourself, and then you can basically show off that, look, this is what I did, this is the sound design I go for. And I was really known for that for back in the days. I was a hands-on guy, and I still am. And slowly I'm starting to buy again hardware because I feel more comfortable by doing something at hand rather than sitting in front of the screen and, you know, something is doing it for me, like a software kind of plug-in. So.
I've never produced a track, but if I told you that I want to get into producing, what kind of advice would you give me right now?
Why would you be a producer?
That is a good question as well. Let's say I have a good answer for that, and what would you give me, like, advice-wise? What do I need to think about, or what would you tell me to think about?
Don't watch too much YouTube videos about how can I do this, how can I do that. I was talking with Stoneface and Terminal, good friends of mine, earlier in the car, and I was telling them that my 12-year-old son is producing as well. Not because his father is a producer or a DJ, but in the living room we have an iMac, and I have Logic Pro installed on there, just in case I come up with a quick idea and I want to do something while I'm watching a game or TV. And one day he just took the chair and he sat in front of it and he started experimenting. I swear you, I did not explain him everything. He started to produce some stuff in Logic Pro that you might not believe for a 12-year-old, because it's his curiosity. So I think it's not because he's seeking for something out of it, but I think it's just, he told me that, you know, every time he makes something, he's calling me up. He said, like, hey, Papa, you like this, and how would you do that? And I told him, I'm not going to tell you. It's something I want you to do. I want to see how he does something, or maybe he comes up with a new sound or kind of twist in a genre like Skrillex did with fusion up drum and bass and other electronic genres, dubstep and stuff like that. So there goes an example. I think if you want to be a producer, don't look for it. I think you have to seek the curiosity and then feel, is this something you want to do and you want to share with someone? Because obviously you create music, which you got to share. You got to make sure they love you for that.
That is really good, actually. There was a photo on your Facebook of your foot in the studio too, right? Yeah. What were you doing?
Last week I was doing a summing, it's called. So I finished my new Push album. Yes. An exclusive here for the interview. So the new Push album is finished. And it is partially digitally produced. Obviously plugins, like I just explained, and also partially hardware. But I think to go back to the sound of Push where it all started back in the days, we didn't have the bouncing systems or like easy MP3 conversion from audio files. We literally had to record it on something called digital audio tape, or DAT. So, and everything had to go through a mixing desk because we had to mix everything right there on the mixing, digital mixing workstation, whatever. So to regain and to capture that sound again, we pushed the whole album through an SSL 9000 system. It's like a maybe 2 million euro kind of mixing console from SSL. And basically we do that to color the sound. It's not to make it sound like, but it's to give it a color. There is a difference between making something sound like or to give it a color, and it's the color that people go for. You know, a sound you can make sounds of your own, Viktor, but if you color something, it means it's something you give from yourself to the music. And that's what I did in the studio.
What does the album sound like?
I cannot give too much info yet. I can't, unfortunately, not give a release date yet. A new single is around the corner. It should be around October, November. The album should be early 2018. I would say back to basics with what's going on today. You have to, because you have a new generation of fans you create, but you also have to keep, you know, the people that initially made you accepted for what you did also happy. You know, that's the person I am as well. I'm not want to go for a sound that I know, like, hey, I want to, you know, capture what's going on now. I want to do it for what I did throughout my career, forever. I want to make everyone happy. So that's what the album stands for.
Do you have any favorite tracks on the album as well?
There are a couple, but unfortunately I cannot name any names yet. They're all done, produced, wrapped up. We have 3 vocal tracks, which people might not really expect, because Push always also stood for straightforward instrumental trance. So I'm really curious to hear what, you know, people, you know, what the feedback will be on having also some Push original vocal trance tracks. Yeah.
Are you nervous for the release, or how do you feel about that? Or are you curious, or?
I'm not nervous at all. Curious, yes. Basically just to see how it will be adapted and how also the old fans can agree with, you know, that it's no more 2000, that it's 2017 or 2018. You know, I don't like too much that people, you know, hang on my shoulders like, we want another universal nation. And then I say, no, that's not what I want. Otherwise I would have done it. Yeah. So, you know, so it's really hard to make everyone happy, but, you know, it's people should just love me for, you know, I still make music because I love doing it and it's a passion.
What else are you working on right now?
I have a collaboration coming up now with the Thrill Seekers. It might be out by now. And then I might do maybe another album in 2018 already, so that might go fast. But it's still in early stage. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. First, I want to give the Push album attention again and see how it's been, you know, how things will go. And I will keep doing my single releases on FSOE. Really happy to work with them. Fadi literally gave me a carte blanche about, you know, he says, Mike, if I want you in FSOE, it's because I want you, not because we want something captured of what we already do. And that was also initially, you know, where I approached Fadi for. I said, listen, can I do what I stand for within FSOE? And Fadi said immediately, that's what I want too. So there was immediately a good chemistry. So yeah, I love that. So
how does it feel to be part of the FSOE 500 tour today at the Zurich Street Parade?
It's going to be massive. Looking forward to it. It's, I think, my 3rd time playing the Street Parade, so it's going to be fun. And being with FSOE actually also warps me back in the days that people really, you know, stood up and helped each other. And that's kind of what I feel within FSOE. One of the reasons why I joined in and said to Fadi, like, listen, let's make this a long story, you know, not something short, but, you know, let us do something long term. Because, you know, the events I did so far, whether I played with Ali and Fila or with Thrill Seekers with Steve, which I'm so close with for years, is that those guys are really in it for the same reason I'm in it and still in it. And that works that long, that lasts long, that way of working.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time.
Welcome, Victor. Nice to meet you. Finally.
Nice to finally meet you too. Man.
Yeah, man. Great interview.
Yeah, how was it?
It was good. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Viktor Kidson, and I'm here in Zurich for the Synergy Events presents FSOE 500 at the Zurich Street Parade. Thank you so much for watching.